In a small town there lived a young woman named Ivory. Every morning, she woke up early to the sound of birds singing outside her window. She enjoyed these moments. The sky was often blue, and the sun brought warmth into her small room. Ivory loved the quiet of the morning, but her mind was always busy. She thought about many things, especially the unfairness of life. Her heart felt heavy as she considered the world outside her bubble. Ivory worked in a local shop. Her job was simple. She served customers and kept the store tidy. It was not a glamorous job, but it paid her bills. Still, she wanted more. She often watched people walk by a nearby park. They laughed and played, free from worries, and she wanted to join them. Over time, she began to notice things that trouble her. Some people lived as if they had everything, while others struggled to find food. She felt sad whenever she saw someone hungry. Ivory could not ignore this feeling any longer. Often at night, when she lay in bed, Ivory's thoughts became heavier. Why do some people have so much while others have so little? She wondered. Why is it hard for some to get basic needs? These questions filled her mind. Ivory wanted to understand the world better. She hoped to learn what made life unequal. The social problems were not just stories. They were real for her and her community. After weeks of reflection, Ivory decided it was time to act. Every day, as she served customers in the shop, she heard stories of struggle. One elderly man came in for food coupons. He always looked weak and tired. Ivory learned he had lost his job months ago. This story touched her deeply. She saw more than a hungry man. She saw a human being with hopes and dreams. Ivory wanted to help him, but how? Should she just keep thinking about these issues? Or should she step out of her comfort zone? In her small town, many held tight to old beliefs. Some thought women should not speak loudly. Others believed certain jobs were for men alone. Ivory felt angry when she heard this. She wanted to challenge these ideas. She wished to raise her voice and make a change. Yet fear gripped her. Could she speak out? Would people listen? Ivory's inner struggle deepened. She had friends who shared her worries but felt helpless too. Their conversations often ended in silence. They all wanted to help, but how? With the weighing thoughts on her mind, Ivory considered asking her friends to join her. Together they might be stronger. The world needed change, and she felt a responsibility to be part of it. As she worked in the shop and watched people go about their day, Ivory understood that change started small. She realized that understanding social issues was just the first step. Now, with these thoughts buzzing in her mind, she was ready for the journey ahead. Would it be easy? No, but she was willing to try, to learn, and to connect with others who felt as she did. The days passed, and Ivory felt more connected to her town. She began to notice the problems all around her. One afternoon, while working at the shop, she met a mother with 2 children. The mother looked worried. She counted the coins in her hand. Ivory saw that the woman needed help but did not know how to ask for it. This woman was struggling to feed her kids. Seeing this hurt Ivory's heart. It was another reminder that many people faced hard times. Later, Ivory spoke with a friend named Anna about what she had seen. Anna shared another story of a family next door. They can't pay rent. They may lose their home soon, Anna said worriedly. Ivory felt a sense of urgency. This is so unfair, she said. How can we just let this happen? But Anna had a different feeling. It is just how life is, she replied. Some people have money and some do not. Ivory felt confused. How could someone think it was normal for people to suffer? The problem seemed bigger than she thought. Some friends in their town believed the poor were not trying hard enough. If they worked more, they would have more, one friend said. Ivory could not accept this view. It felt wrong. She believed everyone deserved a fair chance. Not all families had the same support. A person's success was not only about their own efforts. The social norms made the problem stubborn. As days passed, Ivory faced yet another challenge. A newspaper article caught her eye. It talked about the growing divide between rich and poor in her country. The numbers were shocking, and Ivory couldn't help but feel worried. The gap was wider than ever. Some people were living in wealth while others went hungry. Why did these problems keep going? She thought this should be talked about more. That same week there was a town meeting. People gathered to discuss issues in their community. Ivory felt scared and hopeful at the same time. She wanted to attend, to learn, and to speak out. When she got there, people shared many views. Some voiced their fears about losing jobs. while others spoke about hopes for better opportunities. But the divide grew sharp. A business owner stood and said, "We need to keep things as they are. Change can only hurt us." Ivory felt a surge of emotion. She wanted to shout, "But what about those who suffer?" she thought. Still, she stayed quiet. She could see that not everyone wanted to change. Some had power and felt safe in their comfort. It was clear that supporting the status quo was easier than accepting the problem. For many, change felt scary. Yet, despite these frustrations, Ivory felt a spark within her. She knew these obstacles only made her more determined. With every story she heard and every person she met, she felt stronger. Seeing the pain and struggle around her encouraged her to find a way. Ivory believed that by sharing voices and stories, she could shine a light on the issues. Change would not come easy. However, she felt ready to take on the challenges and inspire others. Together, they could create hope and positive action in their community. It was time to step up and make their voices heard. As the days went on, Ivory felt more passionate about helping her community. She often thought about the people who needed support. But every time she tried to speak up, something stopped her. She had her friends around her, but they seemed unsure. Many questioned her intentions. "Why do you care so much?" one friend asked. Ivory felt stuck between her desire for change and the attitudes of those close to her. At the town meeting, Ivory heard many opinions again. Some people continued to believe that the poor were just lazy. Others mentioned their own struggles without connecting them to the bigger picture. "This is not our problem," a local politician said loudly. His words troubled Ivory, highlighting how many people avoided facing the truth. It dawned on her that change needed more than desire. It required deep understanding and acceptance of the issues facing their community. In the following days, Ivory sought more information about social issues. She attended workshops, read books, and listened to stories of people who had faced challenges. This new knowledge opened her eyes. She learned about systemic problems that made life hard for many. She realized that unfair structures existed, often without the common person knowing. The more she listened, the more her heart sank. It was not just about hunger. It was about justice and equality. This realization filled her with anger and sadness. Despite her growing knowledge, resistance surrounded her like a wall. When she shared her thoughts with friends, they reacted negatively. "You are thinking too much," they said. This comment hurt her. Did they not care about the suffering around them? Ivory wanted them to see, but it felt like shouting into a void. Each hurtful remark made her question her path. Would her efforts have any impact? One particular night, Ivory heard two men talking outside the shop. Their words echoed in her mind. "Those people should be grateful they have what they do," one man said with a sneer. Ivory felt her blood boil. This attitude seemed so unfair and wrong. She wanted to step outside and make him see the truth. Instead, she remained silent, fearing further confrontation. The reality that some still held such beliefs made her feel small. How could she change minds when so many were closed off? The pressure grew heavy. Ivory realized she faced not only personal challenges but also social ones. More often, she encountered misinformation spreading in her town. She heard things like, "The economy is fine. No need for change." Ivory wanted to say, "That's not true. People struggle every day." The pressure to comply made her feel trapped. She witnessed the lies and misbeliefs but found it hard to counter them. The tension built each day. As she walked home one evening, Ivory gazed around her neighborhood. Things that once felt normal now looked different. The sad faces of her neighbors felt like a reflection of her own struggles. She realized she had a choice. She could either sit back and watch this happen or find a way to push through. This was the moment when Ivory understood. Change would not come easy. Yet, she felt a calling to keep fighting for those who could not fight for themselves. The obstacles before her were mighty, but her determination began to grow. Ivory could not back down. Her resolve hardened like metal. She wanted to help make things better, even if it took time, courage, and wearing down the heavy wall of resistance. The weight of the past weeks pressed heavily on Ivory. She watched her town struggle, yet many chose to ignore the pain around them. The tension built inside her like a kettle ready to burst. One evening, after a long day of work, Ivory found herself thinking deeply. The issues she had seen could no longer sit quietly in her heart. She knew she had to act, but what could she do? That night, she received a message about an upcoming town hall meeting. It would be a chance for residents to speak about challenges and offer solutions. Ivory felt a voice growing in her. This could be the moment to share all that she had learned and to create change. Yet doubt crept in with every thought. Would the people listen? Would they support her ideas? Or would they turn against her? As the day of the meeting approached, Ivory's heart raced with excitement and fear. She spoke to herself in the mirror. You can do this. Your voice matters. But a part of her still worried. The town leaders had even been part of the problem. They liked things just as they were. What if they ridiculed her? Finally, the day came. The hall was buzzed with chatter, and people filled the chairs. Ivory's pulse quickened as she took a deep breath. Friends greeted her, but the worry in their eyes was clear. Don't rock the boat, Anna whispered. Ivory understood the risk but felt stronger than before. She stepped forward when it was her time to speak. The room quieted down as she approached the microphone, her hands shaking. Thank you for being here, Ivory began nervously. She shared her concerns about the divide between rich and poor in their town. Her words spilled out with emotion. She told her story, reminding them of the people they saw daily. The elderly man who couldn't find work, the mother searching for food for her kids, and all those who felt invisible. But as she continued, she noticed the expressions of some listeners turning sour. Their discomfort made her heart race even more. Suddenly, one of the town leaders stood up. We hear you, he said sharply, but this is not how we solve problems. His voice echoed in the room, cutting through her confidence like a knife. Ivory felt vulnerability crash down on her, but she pushed against it. People are suffering and we must help them, she said, raising her voice with determination. After her speech, the room was still and tense. Many bristled at the thoughts she shared. Some people whispered doubtfully. Ivory's heart sank. The weight of their judgment wrapped around her. She felt she was fighting against the tide. As the conversation continued, Ivory realized the stakes were higher than she thought. There were those who preferred to silence voices like hers. If they felt threatened by her words, how far would they go to stop her? With each glance at the cold faces, fear gripped her again. Would they isolate her or worse, tarnish her reputation for trying to create change? The faces of her friends who once encouraged her looked unsure now. The change she sought would come at a cost she might not be ready to pay. Ivory fought her internal self-doubt, battling her fear of failure and opposition. Still, she stood firm in her choice. Change was needed, and she could not walk away now. The moment had come. It was time to decide. Would she push forward or retreat into silence? She took a deep breath, ready to face whatever came her way. The room was tense as Ivory stood at the microphone, her heart pounding within her chest. She could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her, and the silence felt heavy in the air. It was in this moment, overwhelmed with emotion, that she knew she had to take a stand for those who could not. The moment had come to confront the very system that seemed to silence the voices of the needy. Please listen to me, Ivory pleaded, her voice trembling but resolute. We can no longer ignore the reality people face every day. Many in our community struggle while others have more than they need. This system is broken. As her words hung in the air, Ivory could sense immediate resistance. The sharp leader who had spoken before now glared at her. Anger and disbelief painted across his face. You are pushing false information, he shot back. You make it sound like a fairy tale. Do not blame our community for their choices. Ivory felt an instant surge of determination. She would not let fear or anger discourage her. But it is not just a choice. Many people work hard, and still they cannot make ends meet. You do not see the larger picture, she insisted, standing tall in the face of opposition. Her courage ignited a fire within her. The audience exchanged nervous glances, with some showing support and others looking more uncomfortable. The tension in the room reached a boiling point. Ivory began to feel a mix of anxiety and urgency. If we don't wake up as a community, how can we move forward? We need change, not just for today but for future generations. With each word, urgency developed in her chest. It was not just about her. It was about everyone struggling. Ivory recalled the stories she had heard and the faces she had seen. Desperation surged within her. She could put their pain into words and make others feel it too. Do you know what it feels like to worry every day about feeding your family? She asked, locking eyes with the leader. Do you know the weight of that fear? We must be the ones to help lift it. Her voice was rising now, filled with passion. As she spoke, Ivory noticed support from some faces in the crowd. They were nodding, showing silent agreement. But one fierce look from the leader reminded her how high the stakes were. His influence in the room was strong, and she could see he was growing angry. "You have no right to create chaos," he barked. "You will only cause problems for yourself." Despite his threats, Ivory felt a belief in her rightness growing. The room felt electric, charged with charged emotions. Everyone seemed to be holding their breath. Ivory could not back down now. She chose to confront the system head-on. "Maybe exposing the truth means facing backlash. But I'd rather fight for what's right than stay silent in darkness." This declaration resonated through the room, as silence followed her words. At that moment she realized how deep the stakes were. The fear of losing support mixed with the urgency of her mission. But she was ready to stand alone if needed. Ivory took a deep breath and pressed forward. The power of her message would not yield to fear. "Let's work together. Change is not just possible. It is necessary." Her voice rang loud, igniting the passion within her and sparking a glimmer of hope. The time for hesitation had passed. Ivory had embraced her truth. With courage flowing, she stood willing to face whatever came next. The path before her was steep, but she felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever before. After the heated town meeting, Ivory felt as if she had stepped into a new world. The atmosphere had shifted. It was neither complete darkness nor total light. Some people left energized while others were full of doubt. Ivory observed her community through different eyes. The impact of her words echoed in her mind, ringing with both excitement and fear. Though some supported her, a thick tension remained in the air. In the days that followed, Ivory noticed small changes starting to take place. A few neighbors who once frowned at her efforts now approached her with curiosity. They wanted to hear more about her ideas. "You spoke from the heart," one woman said. "I didn't realize how many lives we can touch by discussing this." This small victory warmed Ivory's heart. It felt good to know that her voice had started to create ripples, but not everyone shared this sentiment. The town leader remained firmly against her views. He continued to speak against her in public, insisting that the community was better off as it was. His words aimed to discredit Ivory, projecting a fear that threatened any little change. Ivory heard whispers about him warning others to stay away from her ideas. The challenge ahead was clear. For every step forward, there were still strong forces pulling back. Despite the resistance, Ivory kept pushing through. With some support from newfound friends, she decided to organize smaller meetings to discuss ideas for change. Each meeting drew small groups who were eager to listen and share. They spoke about ways to help those in need in their community. Gradually, her enthusiasm spread. The energy at these gatherings was alive. While not everyone agreed, many began voicing their concerns and hopes. One afternoon, as Ivory coordinated a fundraiser for the local food bank, she saw how excitement mixed with challenge. Volunteers showed up to help, carrying boxes of food and donations. The event filled the small local park with people exchanging stories, laughter, and food. Children played nearby, and for a moment it seemed that hope was born anew. Seeing friends and neighbors come together gave Ivory strength and motivation to keep shaping change in her community. However, the outside world was not as forgiving. The leader spoke out against her efforts on social media. "Don't fall for her lies," he claimed. "She disturbs the peace." This backlash hurt, but rather than deter her, it pushed her to act. Instead of cowering in fear, Ivory chose to engage. She wrote an open letter shared with the community. "We can be better together," she wrote. Her message resonated, pulling together support from unexpected places. Readers began to reply, thanking her for her honesty. Slowly but surely, people began to see the change Ivory envisioned. Discussions about societal issues grew louder and more common. Some leaders were beginning to listen. Although it was not a perfect solution, it felt promising. Further gatherings were planned to involve more hearts in the conversation. Change would not happen overnight, but seeds had been planted. Every small victory, no matter how tiny, mattered. With the support of her friends and community, Ivory felt inspired to continue. She knew that together they could make a difference. The world was still complex and challenges remained doggedly real. Yet hope now shone a little brighter. Ivory was drawn in by the possibilities of what could happen next. eager to shape the next steps on her journey toward change. As time passed, the news of Ivory's efforts spread throughout the town. Many people were surprised by her bravery and began to look at the problems in a new light. A local newspaper published an article about her fundraiser for the food bank. Readers learned more about the challenges their neighbors faced. The article sparked curiosity, prompting open conversations among families and friends, which began to change minds. People who once felt indifferent about the social problems now felt a push to discuss them. Neighbors met over coffee to share their thoughts. Some expressed sympathy while others resolved to action. Ivory started receiving messages from people asking how they could get involved. "We see things differently now," one message said, "and we want to help." At school, students became inspired by Ivory's story too. They began organizing their own efforts to help people in need. Children and teenagers took to their social media, sharing their thoughts about fairness and kindness. Ivory felt proud of the youth leading the charge. They were eager to create a positive influence in their school and community. Despite this growing momentum, Ivory also felt the tension and resistance that loomed large. The town leader did not appreciate the shift in attitude. "There's no need to change what is working," he continued to assert loudly in public forums. His message aimed to silence those who began to speak out. This created tension between his supporters and Ivory's allies. People began to choose sides, splitting the town into two very different groups. During one community meeting, Ivory faced the hostility of the leader and some older folks who remained loyal to the status quo. "You are causing trouble," one man yelled at her. Ivory felt a wave of fear wash over her, but she stood her ground, reminding herself of the support she had. She took a deep breath and said gently, "It is not trouble, it's a chance for us to grow together." But the pushback took a toll on her spirit. Did everyone truly believe there was a need for change? Some days felt heavy with doubts. Even with victories blooming around her, Ivory could feel the uncertainty grip her emotional strength. The battle for hearts and minds would not resolve quickly. Ivory reminded herself that change often takes time. Moments of progress came with great difficulty. She recalled how long it took for her to find the confidence to speak, and how much she had learned since then. She realized that many people felt lost or afraid. It was not only her job to lead, but also to understand and include others in the conversation. Despite the resistance, Ivory pressed on. She decided to organize a community potluck so everyone could come together. This event did not focus on problems, but centered on sharing meals and stories of hope. Ivory believed that while the past victories were small, they were steps leading to greater awareness and compassion. As she prepared for the potluck, Ivory felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that creating connections was essential. Change was a journey, not just a single action. She would keep planting the seeds and trusting they would grow. The road would remain challenging, yet every step fueled her determination to seek a brighter future for her community. As the potluck date approached, she looked forward to seeing how the bonds between people might strengthen and evolve into a force for good. As the sun set on the day of the potluck, Ivory felt a sense of peace wash over her. The park was filled with laughter and the delicious smells of food. People gathered, sharing stories and enjoying each other's company. She watched as neighbors mixed and connected in meaningful ways. This was the change she had hoped for and fought to create. In that moment, she reflected on her journey. Ivory remembered the kind of person she was just a few months ago. She had been hesitant and unsure of her voice. It felt hard to speak out about social issues that affected real lives. But as she faced her fears and shared her thoughts, she discovered strength she never knew she had. With each step, Ivory learned to trust herself. She learned that her voice mattered. She now believed in the power of standing up for others. The conversations around her reminded her of the many ways people had changed. Her friends who once felt uncertain now spoke passionately about empathy and concern for those who struggled. They had become advocates in their own right, willing to learn and share. It filled Ivory with hope, knowing others were willing to join the fight for a better future. However, Ivory also understood that challenges remained. The town leader and his supporters continued to voice their opinions loudly. Not everyone had been won over, and there was still skepticism about the need for change. Some people continued to ignore the work and effort needed to support those less fortunate. Ivory knew this would take time, and she prepared herself for the long struggle ahead. Life in her town was complex, with division still visible. It reminded her that change does not come immediately, It unfolds slowly through determination and community effort. But Ivory had gained more than just knowledge through this journey. She had made bonds with those who wanted to help, and together they could challenge the norm. As she looked around at her friends and neighbors enjoying the food and laughter, she saw a wonderful path ahead. They were beginning to listen to one another, and addressing social issues felt less isolating. The awareness had sown the seeds of compassion within the community. It would take courage to nurture those seeds, but Ivory felt ready. Bringing together people over shared meals had opened doors to understanding. It showed that discussing serious topics could happen in warm surroundings, where connections could blossom. This realization sparked a new hope in her heart. While issues persisted, the stepping stones had been laid. With each bite shared and each story told, Ivory felt the truth grow stronger. Progress comes from unity and compassion. She would continue to nurture this change, one small act at a time. There would be setbacks, but she had faith in her community and her journey. Standing in the park surrounded by her friends, Ivory smiled. Life had begun to change for them. She could see that together they could create a more fair and caring place. She had come far, but the journey wasn't over. With hope in her heart, she was ready to face the challenges to come, believing that even the smallest hearts could cause great waves of change. This was just the beginning of a long, hopeful road. As the potluck came to an end, Ivory watched her friends and neighbors gather in small circles. The initial fears and doubts had faded, replaced with laughter and encouragement. It felt as if the community was slowly healing, learning to support one another. People had come from different backgrounds, but this day reminded everyone of their shared humanity. They discussed plans for future gatherings, and the excitement was contagious. Ivory noticed that the fearless spirit she admired in others had also grown within her. The voices that had once seemed weak now held power. They were no longer afraid to discuss what mattered most. As she listened closely, she could hear stories of struggle, triumph, and hope. Each story strengthened the bond among them, making the glass walls of indifference begin to crack. Days turned into weeks and the momentum thrived. The small changes turned to bigger actions. There was a community garden project born from the potluck idea, growing both food and friendships. Neighbors began to lend hands and share tools. A sense of ownership grew around the project, reinforcing what Ivory had always believed. When people come together, change is possible. The town leadership began to notice as well, albeit hesitantly. They saw the effects of Ivory's courage and the passion in her community. Support came from unexpected places, as local businesses began to aid the efforts for change. They donated resources and encouraged employees to volunteer. This shift painted a bright picture for the future that Ivory had fought for from the very beginning. Although not everyone agreed with her ideas, conversations started shifting towards understanding. Ivory confronted those who opposed her and made her case respectfully, leading to discussion instead of division. This change built bridges instead of walls. People began to share their beliefs, even if they differed. Change was underway like a quiet wave rising higher with each tide. While the journey ahead remained long, Ivory took pride in the progress they had made. However, she never forgot the challenges that still existed. She knew that there would be moments of doubt ahead, and that not everyone would be ready to accept change. Some voices would continue to resist, but Ivory had formed a solid foundation with the support of her community, and together they would face any opposition. She was ready to tackle new battles and learn from them. As the sun dipped lower and the park lights flickered on, Ivory stood among her friends, warmth spreading through her in waves. She reflected on what she had learned through this journey. Each moment, from her struggles to small victories, shaped her into a stronger advocate. Personal change had come not just from speaking, but from listening and building connections. Ivory looked out at the smiling faces around her and felt a surge of hope. What if we each take a step toward change, she thought. It began with one small voice but could change hearts and minds. She encouraged others to ask themselves what they could do to support their friends, neighbors, and community. With a heart full of belief and determination, she knew that even small actions could create ripples of transformation. Ivory understood that every conversation mattered, every small act of kindness counted, and every voice could lead to change. Are we willing to rise together? She asked silently, believing that with commitment, their efforts would lead to brighter tomorrows. She smiled. The journey continued, her spirit steady, ready to inspire others.